In a day with growing signs of Republican frustration and resistance to the president's plans, there's now a new setback. Republican senators are telling MS Now that a vote that we've been expecting all day is scrapped. And it comes after their meeting with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche about this so-called weaponization fund. MS Now's Kevin Fry is following it all from Capitol Hill. What can you tell us, Kevin?
Yeah, Chris, I mean, this is a bit of a 180 from the initial plan. We expected them to start this vote-a-rama later today. It was already punted from potentially kicking off last night. But now we are told by a Republican source close to a top official within the Senate that this is not going to be happening until after the Memorial Day holiday in June. This, of course, would be behind the president after the president's desired outcome of having this all done and wrapped up by June 1st. Now, nominally, this is a bill that is about funding the remainder of the Department of Homeland Security, which, of course, was pulled out from the government funding bill, ICE, Border Patrol, and so forth. However, it has gotten tied up in debates over two unrelated matters. The ballroom funding question, money for the East Wing, which we have seen a number of Republicans come out and express discomfort with, and then especially within the last 48 to 72 hours, this $1.8 billion fund, this anti-weaponization fund, which, among other things, we have seen Senator Cassidy question its legality, say, what about this timing? People don't want this. They want money to help them, get through their daily lives. Senator Tillis saying that it's basically stupid on stilts. The list goes on, with enough Republicans coalescing around frustration and expressing that in that meeting that lasted about 2 hours on Capitol Hill with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche today. There's enough to slow this momentum as Republicans weigh, okay, what are our options? We knew that Democrats within the Senate were likely to try to force votes on an amendment to strip or block that $1.8 billion fund. Now Republicans are wrestling with, okay, do we try to block it, put restrictions on it? And those discussions now are continuing.
Well, the halls of Congress are empty right now thanks to Donald Trump's proposed slush fund. Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune canceled a planned vote-a-rama on the party's ICE funding, a vehicle they also were maybe going to use to funnel taxpayer dollars at Trump's ballroom, unclear, and instead just said, we're done, we're out, sent the chamber home until June. Happy weekend, guys. Nice work if you can get it. Now, this followed an hours-long meeting with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who came into the private Senate Republican caucus lunch, where a bunch of Republicans, some reporting says 25 members, got up and speak to him, dissatisfied with Blanche's answers about Trump's $1.8 billion seditionist boondoggle, and signaled they would help Democrats block both that and the ballroom funding. Then, after the meeting, reporters asked Thune if the White House had consulted him on either of these two main funding initiatives.
Well, it would have been nice if they had consulted. And I think they probably would have gotten plenty of advice from lots of folks about it. But it's water under the bridge now, and you play the hand you're dealt, and we'll sort it out from here. But obviously, it became a more complicated and bumpy path than we had hoped for.
Senator Chris Van Hollen is a Democrat of Maryland. He recently grilled the acting attorney general on that $1.8 billion fund during an appropriations hearing. Senator Van Hollen joins me now. So my understanding from the Senate caucus lunch, obviously you were not in there, it's the other caucus, was that they were pretty unhappy with this whole situation. I want to read you just a few more quotes here and get your reaction to what's going on that side. Tillis, imagine that, a fund that's set up to compensate people who assaulted Capitol Police officers. People that have pled guilty to physical acts may actually be able to get compensated. How absurd is that coming out of my mouth? Here's Mitch McConnell. So the nation's top law enforcement officials asking for a slush fund to pay people who assault cops? Utterly stupid, morally wrong, take your pick. It does seem like they found a thing that they won't walk the plank for.
Well, Chris, I think what really upset them was maybe not so much the slush fund, although people like Thom Tillis, who are retiring, have been very vocal about it. But the fact that we were going to offer amendments to the bill that we were supposed to be working on tonight that would have put the question to them, do you want your taxpayer dollars used to make payments to people who have been convicted of violent crimes, including beating up police officers or people who were convicted child molesters? They didn't want to face those votes, and so they decided to go home instead.
I want to be clear about this because this is part of Senate procedure where it can get wonky. But basically, as they're moving through, there are these things we call vote-a-ramas, and it's a period where the minority party can offer amendments, and you got to vote on the amendments. And the way that the majority party gets through the vote-a-rama is you just party line vote all the other party's ones down, right? You were going to offer amendments like, should money go to people that assaulted police officers? Should money go to convicted child molesters? And they were going to have to vote, yes, money should go to them, is basically what you're saying.
Well, that's exactly right, Chris. I also filed another one that said no monies from this slush fund should go to members of Congress. You may recall there are some senators who've been trying to get federal payments to them for what they claim was wrongdoing. So they would have had to also vote on whether or not these public taxpayer dollars would go to themselves or whether they would continue to be eligible under the fund. The amendment would make them ineligible. So that's exactly what's happening. You know, I'm not sure they would have actually risen up against this slush fund unless they were going to be put to the test through their votes. And I made clear, others made clear that we weren't going to get out of there on the vote-a-rama without taking these votes.
Now, they've just delayed things, right? So this is a sort of short-term solution of just like unplug the gaming console from the wall, right? So that they don't have to keep playing. Yeah. But, you know, the game's saved. They're going to come back and like, it's going to be the same situation. Am I wrong?
Well, that's right. I mean, as you pointed out earlier, the underlying bill here is to provide another $70 billion to a lawless ICE operation, even though there's a huge pipeline of taxpayer dollars already sitting at ICE. So the answer is they will come back. But I think what they're hoping, Chris, is in this intervening week that the acting attorney general, who really is continuing to act like President Trump's personal attorney, but that he will somehow develop guardrails around this fund. Now, whether he can actually do that now that the cat's already out of the bag, I don't know. But that's what they were, I think, essentially telling him that he needed to do.
Right. Just to be clear, the negotiation is not to get rid of the fund, which itself, I think, is completely lawless and indefensible and essentially a theft of the public purse. But to create some like side agreement that says like, well, the child molesters won't get any, like we'll keep the pedophiles out. But I just want to play for this, read this to you. Enrique Otario, who's one of the Proud Boys, who's convicted of seditious conspiracy, very serious, conviction, sentenced to 22 years for seditious conspiracy over the role that he played in that fateful day, said he planned to apply to the fund, assuming he could get between, and this is his words, $2 and $5 million, and then added, "I'm not greedy, but my life was all effed up because of this." The people, those are the people that seem to be ready to get in line for this money.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why the acting attorney general is going to have trouble putting up guardrails. Because if you look at the history of this fund that was just announced the other day, but has been thought about for a while, it is precisely, Chris, to try to reward people like the January 6th rioters, including those who were convicted. I questioned the attorney general the other day about somebody who'd been part of the riot on January 6th, who'd been pardoned by Donald Trump, who went on to be convicted of child molestation, who was saying to the kids that he molested, you know what, just don't tell people about what I did, and I'll give you some of the money I'm going to get from this slush fund. So all of those January 6 rioters have been anticipating these funds, and that is essentially what it was designed for. So it's going to be hard for the attorney general to put up enough guardrails here, I think.
Guardrails. I mean, guardrails is really a crazy thing to think about with respect to this thing. Senator Chris Van Hollen, thanks for your time tonight.
Well, Washington agrees on something. It is officially a slush fund. That is the agreed-upon Washington term for Donald Trump's fund for paying people who committed crimes for Donald Trump. Democrats started calling it a slush fund right away, but now Republicans are calling it a slush fund. Former Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell called it a slush fund today. Mitch McConnell, who is the senior senator from Kentucky, can now be counted as a no vote on Donald Trump's slush fund when it comes to a vote in the United States Senate. Sometimes it's difficult to find the right word, the right phrase, the right label for the latest Trumpian madness, the latest Trumpian crime against sanity. But now Republicans and Democrats agree it's a slush fund. We will soon have polling on Donald Trump's slush fund. But as of now, every new poll that comes out already shows Donald Trump at new lows in that poll. Imagine how much lower Donald Trump is going to go in the next round of polls that begin next week or later, when the slush fund finally gets factored into the polls. Senator Mitch McConnell's official statement today was simple. So the nation's top law enforcement official is asking for a slush fund to pay people who assault cops. Utterly stupid, morally wrong. Take your pick. The answer is, of course, both. You don't have to pick. The answer is utterly stupid and morally wrong. That's Donald Trump. Republican Senator Thom Tillis is now the best Republican phrase maker opposing Donald Trump's slush fund, calling it a, quote, payout pot for punks and stupid on stilts and tyranny.
I think it's stupid on stilts.
Why?
Because it will invariably put us in a position where your taxpayer dollars and my taxpayer dollars could potentially compensate someone who assaulted a police officer, admitted their guilt, got convicted, got pardoned, and now we're going to pay them for that? That's absurd. The American people are going to reject this out of hand. When you take money from me to give to a purpose that I vehemently disagree with, that's tyranny.
Other Republican senators willing to speak publicly against Donald Trump's fund already include Senator Bill Cassidy, who recently lost his reelection primary to a Trump-endorsed opponent, and Senator Lisa Murkowski. The Democrats would only need 4 Republicans to join them to defeat the Trump slush fund in the United States Senate, and it appears tonight as if they clearly have those 4 votes already, and possibly many more Republican votes in the Senate against the Trump slush fund. And the Republican votes matter because it's the Republican votes that will kill the slush fund. The Democrats don't have enough votes to kill the slush fund, but with the Republicans, they can do it. And today, at the closed-door luncheon of Republican senators, almost half of them reportedly opposed the slush fund. Punchbowl News reports, quote, more than 20 senators spoke out against the administration's fund. It's rare for more than a handful of Republicans to speak up at those gatherings. When I worked in the Senate on the Democratic side and was one of the very few staffers allowed into the Senate Democratic luncheons, I'm not sure there was a single day where there were 20 senators speaking on an issue, even the most important issues of the day. One news account quoted anonymous sources from inside the room calling it a, quote, well, not exactly quote, calling it a crap show. And I cleaned that one up. It is very clear now that the United States Senate, with Democratic and Republican votes, is going to vote to kill the Trump slush fund. And Republican Senate Leader John Thune is doing absolutely nothing to save it. In fact, today, he did everything he could to kill it by simply closing up the Senate and sending everyone home. From the start, John Thune said publicly that he was not a fan of the Trump slush fund. That was his phrase, not a fan. Majority leaders are very, very careful about every word they choose. And when a majority leader is trying to pass a bill, the leader is relentlessly positive about it in every word. If a majority leader says he's not a fan of a bill, that means he's not only willing to see senators oppose that bill, but it means he's actually trying to create a stampede against it. And today, John Thune did the worst thing you could possibly do to a bill that is in trouble. He sent the Senate on recess. Major holidays are used as important levers in the Senate to force votes. The Republican Senate has been trying to pass a reconciliation bill, which means it needs only 51 votes to pass, which means 50 Republican senators to vote for it, with the vice president then breaking the tie, and that would pass it. That's all it takes. A reconciliation bill should be the easiest possible thing for the Republican Senate to pass now. And what makes it even easier to pass is when you back it up against an important scheduled recess, like the Memorial Day recess, which will allow senators to leave town for a week. Some of them have foreign trips scheduled. Some of them have family vacations scheduled. Some of them have important graduations to attend. Some of them may have weddings to attend. And they all desperately want to leave town. And when senators desperately want to leave town, majority leaders like to use that pressure to force them to cast a vote before they leave town, an important vote, especially controversial votes, especially the difficult votes. John Thune had the power to force that vote, but he also knows how to count. And he didn't force the vote because he knew he didn't have the votes to force. And so rather than see Donald Trump's slush fund go down in defeat, John Thune decided to let the senators go home without voting. They were supposed to be voting right now, tonight. And then, if they were lucky, leave town tomorrow. There's only one thing that happens when you let senators leave town on a recess without casting that difficult vote. There's only one thing that happens. The vote only becomes more difficult. During their week away from the Senate, the Trump slush fund will only become more and more and more unpopular every single day. And when senators come back from their recess, having heard from their constituents whose tax money would pay for the Trump slush fund to pay criminals, there will be far more than 4 Republican senators opposed to Donald Trump's slush fund. And John Thune knows that. John Thune is sending Republican senators home knowing that they will come back even more opposed to Donald Trump's slush fund than they were today. Donald Trump knows he's losing. Donald Trump knows the Republican-controlled Senate now has the momentum to defeat his slush fund and to defeat his ballroom. Today, Donald Trump flip-flopped once again on the Strait of Hormuz and said that he is considering allowing Iran, for the first time in history, to charge tolls for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump has said that he is absolutely opposed to Iran charging tolls, and now he says he's thinking about it. He is simply the worst public negotiator in the history of American politics at any level, from president down to city councilor. Or it might be that Donald Trump's cognitive decline is so sharp now that he doesn't even know what he's saying when he's asked today about Iran charging tolls in the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran is negotiating with Oman to set up a formalization of charging tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. Is that acceptable to you?
Well, we're looking at it. We hear about it. They've negotiated. They've had a relationship with them before. And we'll see. We have total control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade.
We're looking at it. He was totally opposed to it. Now his line is, we're looking at it. We're considering allowing Iran to charge tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, something that has never happened in history, something that no president has ever allowed. And in the same response, Donald Trump claims we have total control of the Strait of Hormuz. And again, let's just consider how addled his brain has to be for him to say we have total control of the Strait of Hormuz. If he has total control of the Strait, why hasn't he reopened the Strait to free shipping that has existed during his entire lifetime until Iran closed it down because of Donald Trump's war? Donald Trump has finally found something. He's found one thing that he thinks maybe he shouldn't do during his Iran war because it would be inappropriate. Donald Trump has played golf 14 times during his war. Donald Trump spent 2 weekends of his war at golf tournaments, 2 weekends. Donald Trump went to the Ultimate Fighting Championship performance where he had a lot of fun with Joe Rogan and other fans for hours on end. But now, finally, in the 82nd day of Donald Trump's war, Donald Trump is concerned with appearances and says he will get killed this weekend if he does not at least pretend to be paying attention to his war. And by killed, of course, Donald Trump doesn't mean killed. It's a very bad choice of words for the warmonger president who started a war he doesn't know how to win and doesn't know how to end. He used the word killed to mean he'd be criticized. Suddenly, Donald Trump claims to be afraid of being criticized. The man who is being criticized by Republicans as utterly stupid and morally wrong for his slush fund claims he doesn't want to do anything this weekend that would get him criticized. And this is his reason for maybe not going to his son's wedding.
Attending your son's wedding this weekend, by the way?
He'd like me to go, but it's going to be just a small little private affair, and I'm going to try and make it. I'm in the midst. I said, you know, this is not good timing for me. I have a thing called Iran and other things. That's one I can't win on. If I do attend, I get killed. If I don't attend, I get killed. By the fake news, of course, I'm talking about. No, but he's got a very person who I've known for a long time, and hopefully they're going to have a great marriage.
Right now on Capitol Hill, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime assistant is facing questions from the House Oversight Committee behind closed doors. Sarah Kellen is the latest witness to sit for a transcribed interview. But there's a unique challenge: how to handle someone who says she was victimized by convicted sex offender Epstein, who has also been accused of handling the logistics and facilitating that abuse. Kellen is one of 4 women named as a potential co-conspirator in that now infamous 2007 sweetheart deal, though her lawyers say she was never consulted about it and didn't even know she was named until years later. She says that association has led to her being villainized for decades as she works to cope with her own sexual and psychological abuse at Epstein's hands. Though some Epstein survivors remain angry at Kellen and her position in Epstein's orbit. Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia was just in that room and is stepping out to join us. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being here. Anything that stands out to you so far from this interview? What are you learning from Sarah Kellen?
Well, we've just gotten started, but Ms. Kellen described to us the process by which she was recruited, groomed, and then abused by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. She described, like unfortunately others we've heard from, being raped and abused while Epstein was serving the sentence for the sweetheart deal that he got from Alex Acosta, which allowed him to go on continuing to victimize people. She shared with us, somewhat astoundingly, that until 2019, she was never interviewed, never talked to the FBI or any law enforcement agency, despite the abuse she endured and the knowledge and information she had about Epstein and Maxwell and how they operated. So we've heard some pretty astounding things already in a short period of time.
And as we laid out, Kellen is alleged to be both complicit in Epstein's crimes as well as a victim herself. How do you see it, and how are you approaching the questioning?
Well, I think it is most likely as you described it. That obviously makes this a more sensitive and delicate interview than others that we've had. But at the end of the day, the purpose of our investigation is to get as much information as possible about Epstein, Maxwell, anyone else engaged in or involved in those crimes. Ms. Kellen has some of that information, and we hope to get it today over the course of the interview.
In recent weeks, you and your committee have spoken to a former president and first lady, several close former Epstein employees, billionaires, a correctional officer who was there the night Epstein died, even a current member of Trump's cabinet, Howard Lutnick. Are all of these interviews leading somewhere? At the end of the day, what is the goal of this ongoing probe? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I think our investigation has already revealed the serious shortcomings of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies' work with respect to Epstein. We've talked to key figure after key figure after key figure who was never interviewed by the FBI. So I think we've revealed already that investigation missed the mark in a lot of ways. Our hope, my hope, is that the Department of Justice or a future Department of Justice will take the information gleaned from our investigation, all of these interviews piece by piece by piece, and reopen some of these investigations that could ultimately lead to prosecutions of others who were involved with Epstein and Maxwell.
Where does your investigation go next after Callen?
Well, we have obviously Pam Bondi coming in on the 29th, and that's going to be really important for us to understand how and why decisions were made to continue the cover-up and fail to release 2.5 million files that still haven't been released, why illegal redactions were made, and what she knows about the shortcomings of the Department of Justice and the FBI's investigations historically with respect to Epstein. I think that can provide us very valuable information. In my view, the American people deserve to see that interview on video. It's not clear that's going to happen.
I want to ask you about Congressman Massey, who led the Republican effort to get the Epstein files released, and he just lost his re-election bid to a Trump-backed candidate. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said, quote, "Releasing the Epstein files was our demise." Going forward, are you concerned about bipartisan support for survivors' pursuit of justice?
Absolutely. And look, I disagree with Thomas Massey probably on 99% of things that come before us here in Congress, but he's been dead right about this. And I see the Trump effort to kick him out, basically to throw him out in this Republican primary, spending tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. It's all part of the Epstein cover-up. They didn't like the fact that he voiced support for survivors, for getting the transparency and accountability that they deserve, and Trump and the whole MAGA machine punished him for it. So I do have deep concerns about the future, the bipartisan nature of this work.
And while you're here, Congressman, I need to get your take on this $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. You serve on the Oversight Committee. What's your obligation to look into this? Can Democrats fulfill that oversight without Republican support?
Well, I think every member of Congress, Democrat or Republican, should be outraged about this. They're no longer hiding it. They're flat out trying to steal the hard-earned money of the American taxpayers. Folks are struggling to pay rent, afford groceries, put gas in their car with skyrocketing gas prices, and Trump wants to set up a slush fund to pay off his political cronies. It's absolutely outrageous. We have a lawsuit to block it. We're filing legislation to block it. We're working in the appropriations of budget process to block it. And there are some Republicans who have found the courage to speak out against it. Unfortunately, it's mostly Republicans who are not running for re-election or recently lost primaries. But there is some bipartisan support to prevent this from happening.
Before we go, the Democratic National Committee just released a report about the 2024 election. It came out just 30 minutes ago. I assume you haven't had a chance to read all the way through it. It's almost 200 pages long, and it doesn't give a full picture about why your party lost. In fact, the DNC chair, Ken Martin, was very critical of this report. He even said, when I received the report, it wasn't ready for prime time. He goes on to say, I'm releasing the report as we received it in its entirety, unedited and unabridged. It does not meet my standards, and it won't meet your standards. But he says people need to be able to trust the Democratic Party and trust our words. So he is releasing it for transparency's sake. Congressman, what do you make of them releasing it now? Is this helpful to your party?
Well, this is the first I'm hearing of it. I think releasing it is the right decision. Obviously, if what you just described is true and it isn't ready for prime time or didn't meet the needs, that's disappointing. We should have had a report that was fulsome and did describe what went wrong for us in 2024, what lessons we can learn and how we can apply them into the future. But I'll look forward to sitting down and reading the report and judging for myself.
Congressman James Walkinshaw, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to that interview with Sarah Kellen.
A coalition of Democratic district attorneys is vowing to prosecute any federal agent suspected of intimidating voters at the polls during the midterms. The announcement comes a week after President Trump refused to rule out sending agents to polling places this November, saying he'd, quote, do anything necessary to make sure we have honest elections. The coalition, which calls itself the Project for the Fight Against Federal Overreach, includes 10 DAs from across the country. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner is one of those prosecutors, and he joins me now. It's good to see you. President Trump, as I mentioned, believes that sending agents to polling places helps ensure honest elections. Do you see it that way?
He doesn't believe any of that. He is totally in favor of dishonest elections and has been a serial election liar and denier. I mean, we all know this. That's frankly just letting him off the hook. This is really very simple. He has a real problem, which is that state court prosecutors who prosecute and convict federal officials are putting convictions on them that cannot be pardoned. It's a real problem. I understand he's used to getting away with crimes. Even when he got caught for 34 felonies, he didn't do any time for it. But the reality is he's got a real problem with state court prosecutors. We have gotten together. We are associating with each other. We're ready to go. And in the same way that my office and the offices of these other members of this group have successfully prosecuted civilians and also prosecuted law enforcement, we will prosecute federal agents who try to interfere with elections. It's a crime in almost every jurisdiction to engage in election interference under state law, and they better get ready for the handcuffs in the jail cell.
So tell us exactly what the plan is to protect voters heading to the polls in November, help them to understand what they might see or what they might experience in their own communities.
Well, really the best plan is that there is a massive turnout of civilians on Election Day in the same way we've had large, peaceful, lawful protests with No Kings and other organizations. They turn out in enormous numbers on Election Day in November, and they turn out in a peaceful, nonpartisan way to monitor the polls. What does that mean? It means lawn chairs, baseball hats, and cell phones. And if they start to see things that don't look right, a military-style truck coming down the street with people in military uniforms, or it looks like some sort of gathering of gear that would be necessary to haul out a voting booth, they get out their phones and they start to take these pictures and take these videos. We've seen the power of this in Minneapolis. It's not just that the whole world knows what's going on. It's that prosecutors like me and the other members of this group have the ability to take that video and carry out a successful prosecution even when the feds don't want to play ball.
So you activated the city's election task force on Tuesday, I understand, for the primaries. Tell me how it went and whether there were any lessons learned for the general election.
It went very well. This is something we've done many times. And I think one of the main reasons it went very well is that whoever wanted to engage in election interference knew better. By being vocal, being prepared, by talking about this, anybody who might want to mess with the vote knows what's coming. And it is, in fact, handcuffs in a jail cell. It's telling a Philly jury why it is you thought you could steal their vote. Philly juries are not going to like that. So deterrence is very, very important here. And I think the reality is that the more we, regardless of our political affiliation, those of us who have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws, the more we get together and we say we're not having this, every vote's going to be counted no matter for whom. If you do this stuff, you're going to jail and Trump can't pardon you, the more we are going to see that there is no problem on Election Day. But as I said, what we truly need is a national movement. And I am calling on all the organizations affiliated with this, No Kings, Indivisible, any worthy group of people. I don't care about their politics. I'm calling on you to organize millions of people to be out, to be peaceful, to have their cell phones, to get their lawn chairs, and to station themselves at places that may be endangered, so that we will have everything we need, A, to deter, and B, to prosecute should something happen.
We saw in 2024 that there were Republicans who stood up and demanded that the elections be free and fair and would not allow any election interference. How many of the folks you're talking to are Republicans? And do you feel that particularly in those places where we can tell by the polls there's likely to be contested elections, that there will be people there who will stand up for what they took an oath to do?
We talk to Republicans all the time who are real Republicans. They're just not MAGA fascists. And the reality is the president is a fascist. He wants to eliminate the vote, not just for some, but for everybody. I mean, that's just the truth. So there are plenty of great Republicans out there who truly believe in democracy. They believe in this country. We talk to them. Our organization is not an organization just for Democrats, although those are the prosecutors who started it. We are looking to provide support and information to any good prosecutor who believes in their oath, who's going to follow their oath, and who's going to protect everyone's right to vote their conscience. And we are prepared to assist. Our website is federaloverreach.org. Happy to assist in that regard. But also, we all just need to understand where we are. November is crucial. There is a chance that this president is going to try some kind of coup. When he talks about election integrity, he's lying. That's pretty much all he does. What he's actually talking about is an army to steal the election. We are not having it. This group is not having it. Our allies and friends are not having it. And most importantly, millions of Americans are not having it. I am calling on millions of Americans. I'm calling on these organizations to organize those millions of Americans to be our witnesses, to be our videographers, to be our protectors, to be the ones who deter what might happen. And I'm telling you right now, if we do that, it will not happen.
DA Larry Krasner, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Joining us, founder and principal of Blue Stack Strategies and former advisor to House Speaker John Boehner, Maura Gillespie. Alex Wagner back with us. So, Maura, is there a difference between the hardcore MAGA voters, Trump voters who vote in the primaries, and the voters who vote in general elections?
There is, and you're going to see the turnout be the biggest question that we have. Turnout becomes the biggest question by and far, when it comes to how many voters are going to show up based on what's happening in their pocketbooks, in their backyards, in their home life. If they feel as though life has not gotten better for them, they're going to show up in November and vote that way. I think that what you're seeing right now, we have a low turnout when it comes to primary voters. And a lot of those who showed up in Texas, in Kentucky, were the boomer generation. Young people are feeling a bit of apathy about the entire political process and don't feel as though there may be a role for them to play. And so what happens with those voters, and where do they go? Where do they turn? And do they show up? And so Republicans who are in Congress or who are looking to get their vote are going to have to speak to them and to the issues that matter to them. And that's going to be the Iran war. It's going to be economic costs, gas prices, and, like you mentioned, inflation.
Do you see this being more acute in maybe some places we might not expect? Do you see it being a factor in Texas, a factor in Georgia, which Republicans want to win back desperately, take away that seat from Jon Ossoff?
I think it could be. I think that what you're going to see is the Republicans in the Senate, they're pretty pissed about what happened over the president choosing to endorse Ken Paxton over John Cornyn, just given the, really what John Cornyn has done for not only the GOP, but also for Trump himself. And then to see that play out because of some, discrepancies or some really personal issues that the president has, I think it's a real big gift to Tallarico and puts that seat at risk that it didn't need to be. It doesn't have to be at risk, but because of the president's decisions and the president's actions, Republicans are going to be feeling that pain point when it comes to November. And I don't see that there's going to be much of a turnaround opportunity for them between now and then unless they distance themselves from the president and point out the fact that the president is patting his own pockets and not delivering on promises he made. For all those people who agree with the president against the EV mandates under, the Biden administration, they're now paying double in gas prices for their cars. So.
Yeah, and we pointed that out. I mean, if Donald Trump wanted to empower gasoline and empower fossil fuels, starting a war with Iran and cutting off fossil fuels and the supply for the country and making gas prices go up everywhere, including here at home. At the same time, as he's cutting off EVs, not smart politically, not smart strategically. Let me put up a Fox News poll, because I think this is so interesting. We know how independents feel. We know how Democrats feel about Donald Trump. The independent number, as you know, Alex, has just gone way up through the roof. But look at Republicans, MAGA Republicans. Trump's approval is 80% among MAGA Republicans. That's an all-time low for MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump. Non-MAGA Republicans, only 54% think he's doing a good job. White voters, 43% think he's doing a good job. Rural voters, 43% think he's doing a good job. This is the squishiest Donald Trump has ever been among Republicans.
Yeah, it suggests that the floor may not be a floor at all, that he may have further to go. We've sort of operated under the assumption that he'll always have like 30% of the country with him, but that may not be true. And you got to look at the macroeconomic factors here. We talked about corruption a lot at the beginning of the show, Katie, and I think one of the reasons why that message is more resonant right now is because Americans are hurting financially. They can't afford to drive to summer vacations. They can't afford the hamburger meat for the Memorial Day barbecue. Maybe they can't afford the air conditioning. They certainly don't have extra money for, purchase power. The purchase power has been grossly diminished. A lot of them are just buying things on credit at this point. If you're a young American, you're worried about all this plus the AI revolution that this administration has done nothing to have a real conversation about. I mean, he's effectively forsaken the economic concerns of Americans at the same time that he's dead set on building a ballroom and repainting the reflecting pool for millions and millions of dollars and erecting an arch and going to war with Iran for reasons nobody can quite articulate, and is sacrificing Americans' health and financial well-being in the process. That's why the sort of corruption message, I think, right now resonates more than it would in any other year, because Americans are in pain. And if you go into the crosstabs of that polling that you just showed, if you go into, subsections of white, non-college educated voters, he's losing them in greater numbers than he had in 2024. Young people, he has a 19% approval rating among voters 18 to 29. I mean, he is hemorrhaging votes. The idea that he's going to hold on to the coalition that he had in 2024 with young people, independents, Latinos, young men of color, they're all gone. And he's done nothing to keep them in the tent.
Alex, do they stay at home or do they vote for the Democrat?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I think what you've seen in some cases with young, especially groups that were more traditionally Democrat that defected to Trump in 2024, is that they're willing to come back to Democrats. That doesn't mean that Democrats' job is done. I mean, I think they can ride the anti-Trump wave and should through November, but there are going to be huge questions about what the Democratic Party stands for on certain key issues if and when they once again control the gavel and if they are going for the White House. I mean, there needs to be a real circling of the wagons there so that people can understand what the Democratic Party is about beyond just a bulwark against the worst impulses of the Trump administration.
Maura, look at this poll we have up here right now. Who do you want to control Congress? We'll put it back up. 50% say Democrats, 39% say Republicans, 11% say independents. So do you take this as this is not just a Donald Trump problem, this is a party problem?
I think it's a party problem if Republicans don't reclaim their authority, especially in Congress. And if you just continue to give away everything to the president, what do you get for that loyalty? And to what Alex is saying, I think that, yes, Democrats will ride this wave in November, but that's what got us here in the first place. If we continue to just bank on this anti-Trump versus pro-Trump, the pendulum keeps swinging, there has to be a plan. There has to be some sort of policy initiative put forward to get those voters to come to you. Because just because I disagree with Donald Trump does not make me a Democrat. And so putting things forward that would actually show me how an economy would work under your leadership, that needs to be put forward, and I don't know that Democrats have done that yet. They have some time, but right now it doesn't. I think banking on that and assuming that this anger and this frustration with the Trump administration is a guaranteed Democratic vote, it's just not. And so I have more concerns about apathy towards voting than anything else right now.
All right, Maura Gillespie, really good to have you. Thank you so much. Alex, always good to have you. Thanks for sticking around for so much of the show.